Hey, good Tuesday morning here. Michael Clark with BAMWX.com and the Weather Portal. I'm going to talk about our latest long-range forecast outlook. We've got our updated week 2, updated week 3 and 4 today, and a pattern that I think that can continue to yield much in the way of snowfall and wintry weather and even an ice storm coming up here in the next couple of days, potentially a crippling one for some of the folks across the Ohio and Tennessee River valleys here. But we are going to watch at least the potential at some of the blocking to subside and perhaps a warmer risk to the outlook here in the 16 to 30 day time frame. So that's going to kind of be my topic of conversation today. So let's get right into it. Take a look here at departure from normal temperatures just over the last 14 days. You can see that we certainly have had the cold air seep down into the eastern and northeastern sections of the country, but it has continued to remain warm across the deep south and in portions of the Pacific Northwest. And this is, again, just the last 14 days, just to kind of give you an idea of what's actually happened versus what some of the model forecasts have been. The precipitation percent of normal, it's been fairly wet. But where it hasn't been wet and where it's a growing concern is the northern plains, the Dakotas and Minnesota, and then here again in the southern plains, Texas, areas running very dry the last 14 days. And so these are two areas obviously you always want to watch as you start considering spring and the planting season, as dry areas like to grow fingers. But regardless, in the short term, there's been adequate moisture here in the central plains, the Ohio Valley, into the mid-Atlantic states. So just something to consider. Now, our forecast here going forward here, using a blended model approach, best you can do right now with all of the noise in the computer ensembles and the computer data is, look at this ice situation possibly developing. Climatology says, Arkansas, they get slammed with ice. It happens often. And then what happens here is you take the core of this and you take it into Kentucky, northwestern Tennessee, the boot heel of Missouri, and you could have a significant ice storm here really over the course of the next couple of days. The interesting note to trend here, you look at the 1 a.m. ensemble run and then versus the 7 a.m., you can see a subtle shift south in the threat for the heaviest ice when you're looking at a blend of all these different computer models. So regardless, a big ice event there. In terms of the ensemble probability of more than 4 inches of snow in a 72-hour time frame, you're lower here, okay? The storm wants to get its act together a little bit more into the mid-Atlantic states. You've got an enhanced risk here, if you will, for 4 inches or more of snow, about a 70% probability getting into the mid-Atlantic states, southern Pennsylvania, West Virginia, and Virginia areas here, with the potential for some more snow. So intermountain snow here as well, or mountain snow in the Rockies, kind of continued deal there. But look at this over the next 2 weeks. This is the GFS ensemble, the overnight run. Continued suggestion of plenty of snow chances. You don't take this verbatim. It's not a blanket foot of snow for everybody from, Nebraska to the Northeast, but it is a good indication of what type of pattern we are in. And I do believe there's going to be continued bouts of snow. And usually when you get some departure of some blocking, you also get a big storm in that time frame as well. And I think we may be dealing with that coming up. Now, I'm not going to get into the specifics of it, but I do think that's on the table. Looking at the GFS, just 2-week precipitation percent of normal. All right, we continue to run it dry up in here. A wetter signal down to the south and east, the mid-Atlantic. But I think that sets up shop for continued risks of snow in here where you have cold high pressures coming down and an active southern stream, active storm track down to the south. So this is a look at the model trends, okay? Trends, not actual, okay, face value of the model, if you will. The week 1 forecast from the European model and the GFS model trended a little bit warmer into the east. You look at these and you're looking for basically alarming trends. We don't see anything like that in the week 1 really, but look at what happened in the European ensemble week 2 and the much warmer trend. This model has flipped and flopped, I think, about 7 times in the last 7 days. It's almost like every other run, it gets a lot colder, and then it gets a lot warmer, and then it gets a lot colder. And it's just, when you're talking forecasting extreme temperatures of -10, -20, -30 degrees, Even a warmer change doesn't necessarily signal that it's actually warm. It's the difference between minus 20 and minus 5. So you have to kind of keep that in perspective as well. But regardless, the overnight GEFS went back cooler again in the east in the 7 to 14. So these trends, again, there's not really anything alarming in the trends, in my opinion. It's nothing we haven't seen in the last 7 to 10 days. Week 1 on the left, European GEFS, incredibly cold. All right. Week 2 on the right, European top right, GEFS bottom right, everything's cold. Everything's still pretty cold, nationwide cold for the most part in the week 2 time frame. It's what happens really in that 12 to 15 day time frame we need to kind of focus on. We look at our all model HDDs, and we can see we're well above the 10 and 30 year normals. Where we start to notice a possible dip or discrepancy gets into that 22nd, 23rd time frame of January. And so that's where we kind of need to watch to see if we're going to dip back down below normal heating demands in a warmer pattern for that time, and kind of dissect that. So this is a look at the day-by-day GEFS ensemble. And you can see the cold air, the reinforcing shot of the Arctic air really spills down here into the country day 6, day 7. It's incredibly cold for many of us. And the cold lingers, but it starts to lessen in intensity. Here's day 11, day 12. You see, as we start to get out here, the colder air is letting up pretty quickly. Out by day 15 or 16, what happens is we start to see the development of possibly or perhaps a warmer risk here across the Great Lakes, the southern U.S., the southeast, and the mid-Atlantic and northeast, where we see the potential of a warmer pattern developing where you can get warmer in here and load up the cold across the Pacific Northwest and the Central Plains. More of a classic negative AAM February La Nina pattern, throwing in the potential for some MJO phase 1. The GEFS might make a lot of sense. Here's what doesn't really add up to me currently. That's how warm the European gets. It gets incredibly warm. These are the changes. Let me show you the actual face value here real quick. Watch what happens day 12, 13, 14, 15. It starts to really crank up the warmth here nationwide. And it really departs, all the blocking is gone by day 15 in the EPS. I'm not entirely sold on that solution either, because I don't think that, when looking at this, that's something that's on the table given everything considered, given the MJO, given everything we're looking at with the polar vortex. I certainly think that we can still hold on to some colder risks for a time at least. When we look at the MJO, this is what we notice. The OLR, the outgoing long wave radiation, has been kind of parked over the maritime continent, closer to the 7 or 8 phases. All right, but you look at the VPs, which is our velocity potential, or our just some upward motion, if you will. It's starting to propagate east and develop a new upward motion indication here, if you will, over Africa, or MJO phase 1. So there's conflicting signals. There's mixed signals between the tropical forcing mechanisms in the atmosphere. So it muddies the water a little bit. And when you look at the computer model ensembles, the European, it's kind of sitting and spinning in phase 7, and then it wants to try and start to go 8 into 1. I don't have a huge discrepancy with this. I don't think this is completely off base. I do think that we are going to possibly get into 8 and then 1, and that's why the models may be really pulling back on the cold. The other thing they're doing is the global wind pattern, they're slowing it back down, which is when we look at our angular momentum forecast, the atmospheric angular momentum. It's been positive for a time, and it looks like the models want to take it back negative. Well, when you look at years in February where that happens, in a La Nina with an MJO in phases 8 and 1, and 2, you start to factor in perhaps a warmer eastern U.S. and southeastern U.S. risk to that forecast. All right, we're seeing both models indicate a negative angular momentum wants to take hold. When you look at that since 1990, all right, February, MJO, phase 1, negative AAM, it looks a lot like that GEFS I was showing you at the end of the run. All right, the other thing that concerns me, the other warmer risk here to the extended outlook, is all of this positive North American mountain torque. And what that means is essentially a lot of high pressure in the Canadian prairies, into the central U.S., even to the north and east. And that positive North American mountain torque works against the blocking, especially the negative NAO. This is working against the negative NAO. These two are working in tandem. And so you also notice a big Bering Sea storm. This is just a 5-day average. But regardless, the models overnight really have taken a big step away from negative NAO, negative EPO, so on and so forth. A lot of positive North American mountain torque. And I think that the risk overall for the negative P&A can continue. So we've got a couple of things working against our cold hanging around forever, but we also have a thing or two that's trying to keep it around. Okay, I want to show you that real quick. This is the European's stratospheric polar vortex forecast. Just looking at 30 millibars. Watch what happens here towards the end. Watch how we start to take the cold from here, and the core of that vortex kind of shifts back into the north and west, into the Canadian, the far northwestern portions of Canada, into Alaska. What would happen is that would possibly allow for a southeast ridge to develop, or an eastern U.S. warmth risk of some sort, and pull the coldest Arctic air back up into the PNW, which is a La Nina deal. That happens in La Nina. That's the map I just showed you. So you can still get good winter storms with this. You can still get a heck of a gradient and run multiple winter storm risks up through the central portion of the country into the north and east, maybe the interior northeast, but you can still get it. Okay, so that's a risk, but we need to watch that. If that starts to shift, that pulls the cold source with it. In the meantime, the 16th through the 22nd of February, we're incredibly cold. The forecast is cold, no doubt. Central portion of the country, -8 to -12, and plenty of snow chances here the next 14 days. There's no doubt about that. What we start to do is look at a warmer risk here in the forecast in the week 16 to 30 day in the week 3 and 4. Where we potentially see this negative AAM, MJO, lack of blocking look set up. That's our 16 to 30 day concern. And so that's why we've made the warmer risk 60% versus the 40% cooler risk. All right, we're still above normal in HDDs, but if anything, if there's a risk to this, it's warmer trends in here, and it's backing up big storms back into here, back into the central plains. All right, so that's kind of the thought process on weeks 3 and 4. There's your precipitation outlook where you can still stay active in terms of above normal liquid. This is not a good sign. This below normal signal in the south and southwest is not a good sign. It's already incredibly dry there. So again, that's something we need to keep watching as we get into spring. Thanks for watching, guys. Have a great day.